Happy Sunday, y'all. Happy Easter Sunday, y'all. Welcome aboard. This is live Q&A number 85. This is the portion of the show where I just kind of let the notifications go out. We let YouTube decide when they're going to send out the notifications, give folks a chance to get in and get settled in. And here locally, I wait for the clock on the wall to stop chiming in that it's 12 noon here on the U.S. West Coast. And for those of you who are watching on replay, just go ahead and scrub past this graphic that you see at the beginning here. And we'll wait for the clock to finish chiming 12 o'clock. Then I'll reach over here and click a little switch and say, hey, y'all, happy Sunday, happy Easter Sunday, 2021. Holy cow, where's the year going? I mean, it's already Easter. And we were just saying Happy New Year it seems like a couple of weeks ago. Ugh, already. Real quick, I want to thank everybody for the birthday wishes and the happy Easter wishes. And I want to thank those of you who have clicked on those links down below to support the channel. You guys are really amazing. You are really awesome. Thank you very much. I really do appreciate it. More than you'll ever know. This is the follow-up to the video I put out earlier today on more advanced level clipping. And I've already had a few questions about that, both in email, in YouTube comments, and here in the chat. And I want to get to those first. And probably, I think one of the biggest questions that I got was a YouTube comment. And that was from Joe of Wood Studio IA, which I assume is Iowa. I may be wrong. And it was in a comment. And he asked, when you did the roughing and finishing toolpath for the name, you did not select the horses' heads, but they carved. How did this work? And for that, what I'll do is I'll go into Aspire and make sure I'm screen sharing here, and I am. I'll leave my 2D and 3D views tiled, and let's go back over here to the modeling tab. And I said a couple of times in this video that the software models from the bottom up. But what I failed evidently to mention was, when you look at this list over here, this is the component tree. The entire assembly is the model. These are the various components of the model. So when you put a component over into the component tree and you set a combine mode for that component, then you get into the properties and adjust base heights or shape heights or tilt or fade or whatever you do to that individual component. You are taking those components and stacking them one on top of the other and assigning how they're going to interact with one another to create the model. And that's what I meant when I said it models from the bottom up. Each of these components is a separate entity, but in total, they are a composite 3D model. One of the things I do, it's just part of being me, is I tend to say the wrong word on occasion. I know what I mean to say, but I say the wrong word. In the video, I said layers when I meant to say levels. And I also use the term model when I mean component. And that's something that I'm really trying to break myself of doing. While each of these components is a 3D model, when they're placed over here in the component tree and made part of a larger assembly, each one of these is a standalone model, but they're components of a larger model. So it's kind of like a nut and a bolt. They are an assembly. But when you use that nut and that bolt to fasten one part to another, that assembly becomes a part of another assembly and eventually leads to the entire item being built. Well, a 3D model is the same way. While each one of these are a standalone 3D model, they are also components of a larger model. So, with all of this assembled in the way it has been assembled, by the time we get over here to calculate a finishing or roughing toolpath, the software knows that the dish is part of the model, the two horses' heads are part of the model, the name is part of the model, the zero plane is a part of the model. All of these things in aggregate make the composite 3D model. So you don't have to select all of the individual components. The software knows to do that. So I didn't have to select the horses' heads. I didn't have to select anything. The software already knew to assemble all of these components in this order, starting with the flat round circle and then merging these into that circle and then adding the zero plane and then putting the text on top of that zero plane. It knew to do that. So I didn't have to select any of it. And when I tell it to do a roughing toolpath for a 3D model, it knows that that's the model. So I hope I didn't just confuse and make matters worse, but that's basically how it knew to go ahead and take that entire assembly and do the roughing and then the finishing toolpath based on the only 3D model it had there. Now, as I alluded to in my reply to your comment there, Joe, and I see you out there. Thank you for joining us. The only way you can determine what gets cut and what doesn't cut is by turning things on and off, checking or unchecking various components in the component tree, and then that won't be carved. But there isn't really, I can't off the top of my head think of a situation where you would want to do that. If, for instance, you wanted to cut certain components with a 1/8 inch bit, you could still carve the whole thing. And then say you wanted to go back and carve another component with a 1/16 inch bit, then that's when I would use rest machining. And that is simply to keep from having to carve certain things, over and over and over again, or not getting the detail you want. It also eliminates any possibility of there being a mismatch, because when you take a component out, you may change the way the other components interact with one another. So if you have fade or tilt applied to a component, then you remove that component, the way the other components interact with one another without that component there may change. And you may find yourself removing detail that you wanted to keep. So, But that is how you control what gets carved and what doesn't get carved, is by turning things off. So if you wanted to just carve the dish with the name without anything else in the dish, you could turn off the horses' heads. But for that, I think I would just do another model because they're fairly simple to make. I would do another file in another session of Aspire. So I hope that answers your question, Joe. It's relatively straightforward. It took me a while to wrap my head around assembling models like this because I couldn't figure out how they interacted with one another. And it was in watching Michael Mazalek's videos that light bulb finally turned on, and it clicked with me. Aha, that's what I mean. That's what he's talking about when he says this assembles in a certain order and each individual component interacts with the whole as well with one another. So just by breaking it down from level to level and remembering it starts at the bottom, it kind of simplified things. And that was that aha moment for me. So I see Bob Hiltebridle's asking, have I done a video on rest machining? Yes, I have. I'll put a link to it in the description of this video when we're done. But yes, I have. It's been a while back, but nothing has really changed. So let's see, rest machining. I'll put a link to it in the video, in the description of this when we're finished live here. So I hope that answered that, Joe. And thank you for that question. That was a very good question. I did not explain that very well in the video. So let's see. There was another question up here. Let me find it. Okay, Steve Russell asked me a question via email, and what his question was kind of it was a very good question, but it's going to be a little bit more complex than I can explain without going back over here into Aspire. And Steve's question was, let me maximize the 3D view here, on how to make these letters rounded instead of just flat. And he asked, in the context of using VCarve. And I asked him in the chat, do you have VCarve or do you have Aspire? That is going to be basically another video, simply because you can do it in Aspire, but I don't think it can be done in VCarve. Not easily anyway. The way it's done in Aspire, you would not use level clipping to do that. You would, let me get into another instance here. You would, another session of Aspire, I'll just do a simple letter here. Let my fonts load. I have way too many fonts and it takes forever for the software to load up the font list. I got to go through and thin these out, but about the time I try to uninstall one, I think, no, I use that. So there we go. And we'll just use the Arial font that I was using before. And I'll do the M. I'll make it bold. Close that. We'll put it out here in the center and make it large. In Aspire, what you would do is go to the Modeling tab and then create a shape from that vector outline. And you could do a dome shape, an angular profile, a smooth profile, or a flat shape. Now, this option is not available in VCarve because we get into 3D model creation, and that's not included. That's not a part of VCarve. So if I do shape profile, apply, and I'm just leaving everything as it sits. Close it, then look at my 3D view. I have a rounded letter here. So it's just one of those things that is part of Aspire only. But I will get further into this in a separate video. So hope that answers that as much as it can, as much as I can answer it, because there's a lot more to it than that. That's just the a simplistic way of explaining how that would be done. So let's see. I hope that answers that as much as I can there, Steve. So I will do a separate video on that. So let's see. Let me go up here. There were a couple of other questions about this. Dave Blackburn says, great video, but I think I'll have to watch it about 6 more times. Lots of info in there. Yeah, there was another way of making a similar file where the text did not project up out of the dish, but I didn't do that in this video because as it was, the video was over 30 minutes long, and it would have been like closer to an hour, and I think that would have been too much info. So I'll do another video further down the stream. It would be basically combining 3D with VCarving to get a pretty cool effect, I think anyway. But I need to kind of perfect the method before I get into that. But yeah, there was a lot of info. I normally don't like to do that. I don't like to put out so much that it's hard to follow. And if I did that, I apologize. But there's a lot to 3D modeling and a lot to consider because, as I said before, every single component and every single element interacts with every other element. And something else, let me go back to Aspire here before I get too far off, and we'll make sure that I'm screen sharing, and I am. There's something else that I didn't really reinforce, and I should have. Go into the 2D view here, and that is these 2D vectors out here, like the text and my profile for the cutout, and then my machining boundary for the 3D view. None of these 2D vectors is actually on any of these levels. The way they interact with the 3D components is on these levels. So if I were to turn off all of these components, my vectors are all still there. They are on layer 1. So they're not actually a part of the 3D model. They are just the machining limits for all of these individual components, which gives us that finished product. So that was something else that I forgot to mention. And but like I said, I didn't want to get into information overload because I know that's easy to do. This is not the only 3D video I'm going to be doing, believe me. But I'll kind of, take it easy on folks who need a little bit more time. Okay. Let's see. Let me kind of cruise down here. Bob Helped a Bridle. Wow. Thank you very much for the super chat. And I believe I saw another one. And it went away. Well, thank you very much to the person who did the super chat. I really do appreciate it. You guys are awesome, I'm telling you. Let's see. There was another question up here. Lewis Denton wants to know Is there a source of JPEG, SVG, PNG, inexpensive clip art for commercial use? There are a ton of sources of clip art, but one of my favorite is Pixabay, and I'll put a link down in the description to Pixabay. Just made a note of it. I'll put a link to Pixabay down in the description of this video as soon as we're finished. Pixabay is basically a gathering of clip art, images, vectors, video that is the overwhelming majority of them are royalty free for commercial use or public domain. There are a few that may require license for commercial use, but most of them are free for commercial use. Some of them might require attribution, but most do not. They're almost, but not quite the same as public domain. That's my favorite single source. Other than that, I just kind of look. There are a lot of sources out there for free and cheap images and vectors. But as far as any one central place, Pixabay is about as close as you can get. I use Pixabay a lot. They don't have everything, but they usually have something close that I can work with. So I hope that helps, Lewis. Let's see here. Looking down here, Mark Kulig wants to know, off subject, but any suggestions on a good spindle? No, I don't have a spindle. And the reason I don't have a spindle is because I didn't have 220 in the old shop. As soon as I get moved into the new shop, I put in 220 specifically for a spindle. And I'm still doing my shopping on that. I don't know which way I'm going to go. I'm talking to a lot of friends and people who have made the conversion from a router to a spindle, but I haven't decided yet. So when I do make that decision, believe me, there'll be a video on it and I'll let everybody know. But as it sits right now, know that I don't have a recommendation for a spindle. So, sorry. Let's see. I don't know if this is MA21 or MA21. Hi, Mark. Can I use multiple roughing tools or in Aspire? So like a 12 millimeter and 6 millimeter, and at last a 4 millimeter finishing tool. Yes, you can. Okay, now let me back up and regroup on this. You can in most tool paths, I believe. Let me go back into Aspire here and make sure I'm screen sharing. I am. We'll maximize the 3D view here. And I'm going to close my preview and let's go back to roughing. And no, you cannot use multiple size tools for roughing. You would have to do multiple tool paths, separate tool paths. And for finishing, no, you cannot use multiple tools for finishing. You would have to do separate tool paths. However, if you're doing a pocket, you can list multiple tools here. And you simply keep clicking select the tool from the database, add it to the list, use your arrows like I have my 1/8 inch end mill highlighted, use your arrows to move it up or down in the order. And you want to go from largest at the top to smallest at the bottom. Then when you calculate the tool path, it will automatically calculate a tool path for each tool, and each tool path will only machine away what it can machine. And finally, your smallest will come back and get only what these other tools up here miss. So if you start with a 12 millimeter bit up here, then add a 6 millimeter, then add your 4 millimeter, it would take out everything the 12 millimeter could reach, then the 6 millimeter, then the 4 millimeter. But that would be in 3 separate tool paths down here in your tool path list. So you'll need to get in and look, but I think the Pocket and the VCarve, yeah, the VCarve, you can use more than one clearance tool as well. And again, each smaller bit will only machine away what the larger bit can't physically reach. So I hope that answers your question there. And go back over here and get back to you guys where I can see your questions. I hope that answers that. Let's see. Asaf Cam, is it possible we can download Amana tool charts to the program? Yes, you can. I did do a video on that specifically. And I will have to go back and find it. If you give me about 10 minutes after we're finished live here, I'll have a link to that video in the description below. So let's see. Just be warned that the tool database file for Amana tools is huge. It's almost every tool they make. So if you import that tool database, it's going to add almost every tool they make to your database list. And when you go to get into your tool database, it's going to take it a while to load. As a little bit of a cheat, what I did is when I upgraded to my latest version, I'm using 10.5 now, I did not remove version 10 from my computer. I downloaded that Amana tool database and loaded it into version 10. Then when I buy a tool from Amana, I find that tool in the database and export that as a separate file that I put into 10.5. So I'm not loading the entire Amana tool database into my tool database that I'm using on this version. I know that was a little bit confusing, but I go over that in the video, and I'll go back and find that video and put a link to it in the description of this video as soon as we're finished. So let's see. Joe of Wood Studio IA says, still learning the concept of base height and shape height. So the question is, the base height and shape height can be adjusted on each model or on the entire level that will move each component. And I see down here you said you meant component, not model. Yes to both. You can adjust the properties of the level and of each component on that level. But be warned, when you adjust the properties of the level, the way the components on that level may interact with each other differently. So it may change things you don't want to change. Your best bet on that, unless you have to, is to handle the base height and shape height of each individual component before you make any changes to the level itself, as far as base height and shape height is concerned. So I hope that helps. Also on the tool path tab, the position of the model is for the entire model. Yes, for the entire model. And I alluded to that. That was something else I alluded to in the video on when I said that I had increased the entire model thickness to 0.625. That was assuming that the viewer had already watched part 1 about levels and level clipping and knew that the thickness of the model without the name was 1/2 inch. So when I added that text, it on top of that 0 plane, it added that 1/8 inch above that half-inch model thickness, which made it 0.625 or 5/8 of an inch. So where you place the model position in material is for the entire composite model. So yes. Let's see. Russell Faraday says, I do 3D with Rhino. Cool, I may have to hit you up for lessons. What file type do I save that is best for VCarve Pro? STL files are generally accepted as the best. I'm trying to remember what file type Rhino exports as its default. Is it, I know it's not a 3DS file. It's another file format, and I don't know if VCarve will import that. But again, STL file is pretty much the interchangeable standard that everybody uses. I know that if you were to buy a 3D model from a outside vendor, not design and make, it would probably come to you in an STL format. But I'm really not sure if the native Rhino file can be imported into VCarve. I really don't know. I mean, you could find out real easy by opening up VCarve and go to import 3D model. And there's a list there of the file types it will import. I just don't know if Rhinos is on that list. So, let's see. Let's see here. Lots of people talking about different spindles, 2.2K water-cooled. Let me comment on that. Personally, I'm going to go with an air-cooled spindle. Just basically because we have such temperature fluctuations around here. I don't want to be messing with antifreeze and water cooling and all that other good stuff. I just want to run it. So I'm going to go with an air-cooled spindle. I'm not concerned with noise or, wind from the spindle or any of that stuff. So let's see. Steve Russell, with all the carving down into the workpiece, what's the thinnest remaining thickness you're comfortable with using hardwood? It depends on the hardwood, and it depends on the grain orientation. A flat sawn piece of material is going to react differently than a quarter sawn piece of material or a rift sawn piece of material, which is going to be completely different from sheet goods like plywood or MDF or something like that. So it depends on the material that I'm using. Generally speaking, I don't like to go more than halfway into the material if I can avoid it. Now, today's model was 5/8 of an inch. That's probably too deep for my tastes. But I might want to think about making that model a little bit shallower. But it also depends on the level of detail you're after, because there are some models that they need that deep carve to get the proper definition. So it doesn't look like it's been squished down, It's like, imagine a human face, even though it does have 3D shapes, if you mash that 3D shape down onto a real thin model, it doesn't look proportional. It looks phony and contrived. You really need that deeper definition so you get the proper shading around eye sockets and projection of the nose, etc., etc. So it's just one of those things. It really depends on the project and the material that you're using. Generally, as a rule of thumb, I prefer not to go more than halfway through the thickness of the material. But depending upon the material and the project, I may have to. Anything that doesn't cut through the backside, I think, is a success. But then again, you might have stability issues because certain materials will want to cup after you've carved away a good portion of them. Others won't. So I'm going to say those two words that people hate to hear. It depends. You know, sorry, I can't get you any more specific than that. So let me scroll back up. I think I missed a question, but I don't remember what it was. Let's see. No, that was Bob asking about. Nope, that was Bob. Okay, that was the one that I thought I'd forgotten. Hey, I fire from the hip. Let's see. People talking about spindles and stuff like that. Okay. Fritzner Teleside. Hi, Mark. Is there a gadget toolpath in Aspire to make parametric wall art? What do you mean by parametric wall art? Aspire does not do parametric modeling. But if you mean, what do you mean by parametric wall art? If you mean repeating geometric shape, that can be done in Aspire. But maybe a little bit more, maybe a little bit more detail would help me out there. Eric Massey, didn't Peter from CNC Nuts just upgrade his machine for a newer spindle? Well, I don't know that if it was for a newer spindle, but it was definitely a major upgrade. Peter has been working on that CNC router for many, many years, and this was a major upgrade for him. Just a few years ago, he was using an old Craftsman router, and he upgraded to a spindle when parts for this Craftsman router were getting fewer and farther in between. Now he's upgraded to the new spindle. I don't know that he upgraded it for that spindle or if he just decided to incorporate the new spindle into that upgrade. But yes, he did just do a massive upgrade, and it's looking good. I've been following Peter for a long time. In fact, he was the first CNC guy, quote unquote, that I ever subscribed to on YouTube. And I've learned a lot from him. If you're not subscribed to Peter Passuelo's channel, CNC Nuts, you're doing yourself a disservice. You really should subscribe. And I'll put a link to his channel down in the description of this video. Sorry for that break. I can't write and talk at the same time. So, okay, Fetzner Teleside, the way they slice the 3D model. You can slice 3D models in Aspire. I don't know. I guess I'd have to see a photo of what you were trying to accomplish. Aspire does not do parametric modeling. It's pixel based. So for something parametric, you might want to look at Blender or Fusion 360 or Rhino or something like that. If you're looking for real deep reliefs that need model slicing, Aspire can do that, but it's not parametric. So, let's see. Ma21, if I'm not mistaken, Mark explained that Aspire remembers what the biggest tool left behind, so it's not carving air. Yes, that is the way it works. VCarve and Aspire both do that. They remember the bit that has already cut and just remove the areas that the larger bit couldn't physically reach. So, I don't know if I'm freezing up or what have you. It looked like it started buffering there. Okay. My Obi-Wan, Dave Gatton, in the house. So, how you doing today, Dave? Happy Easter to you and Jack. Let's see. Bob Frail says, I believe that is only true for Pocket and VCarve, but not for 3D roughing. Yeah. Excuse me. No, you. Okay, I see. There's the question. Continuing on the Ma 21 question, if you use 3D roughing toolpath and try to use a second roughing toolpath with a smaller tool, the smaller tool will cut air for a while, correct? Yes, it would. It would cut air for a while. Now, let's see. No, I don't know if you'd want to use rest machining. See, that's something that I have not explored. You might be able to use rest machining on a 3D roughing toolpath, but I don't know that for a fact. So that way you could go back and use a 2 or 3 different bits for roughing. But my question is, unless you're doing something that's absolutely huge, I don't know why you would want to. Because the whole purpose of 3D roughing is to hog away the majority of the material. If you want to remove a bunch of material with a, for instance, 1/2 inch diameter bit, then remove more with a 1/4 inch diameter bit, you could also conceivably draw vectors. In fact, Michael Mazalik is just commenting the same thing. You could draw vectors and machine to that vector with, say, a 1/2 inch end mill and then 1/4 inch end mill or what have you. And another thing to consider is, well, yeah, it would still cut air. I was going to say with the Z level, you could actually set it to cut one level and then change over to another bit and cut the rest of the levels, but it would still cut air on that top level. I don't know. I guess you could experiment with rest machining in a roughing toolpath, but I like I said, unless you're talking about something huge that has a lot of detail in it, I don't know why you would want to. Find a medium-sized bit that would hog out most of the material, leaving a machining allowance of 20 or 30 thousandths of an inch, and then let your ball nose come in and clean up everything else. So that's something I'll experiment with, We'll see what happens. I'm not sure. Mark Cooligan asks an excellent question, and this is on me, my mistake. He wants to know if Michael has a video today. Yes, he does have a video today, and it's one that I'm waiting for and kind of excited about. He's going to talk about doing a Celtic weave in VCarve. And my wife has been wanting me to do a project that uses a Celtic weave, but I've been too busy to learn how to use the Celtic weave. So I'm excited to see this and get some information on it. And my fault is I forgot to put a link to it in the description of this video. I will make sure to fix that as soon as we're done live here. But yes, Michael does have a video this afternoon, 5 o'clock Eastern, 2 o'clock Pacific, and he's doing custom-shaped Celtic weaves in VCarve, which means it'll also work in Aspire, but you VCarve guys can get in on this too. So, yes, I'm sorry. Rest machining needs Aspire. It will. The option is not there in VCarve, but this is tax time. This is tax season, at least in the U.S. If you're getting a refund, I mean, that's what I did. I used my refund to upgrade and to buy I mean, just saying. Because if you think you're going to use rest machining a lot, or you're going to get into creating your own models and shapes, like that rounded over text, might be a good time to go ahead and upgrade. And remember, you don't pay full-blown retail for the upgrade. You just pay the difference in price. I know it's still a big bite, but it's less of a bite. You're not losing what you've already paid for. So, let's see. RB Woodwork wants to know, shouldn't you be able to edit a square or rectangle to radius corners after it's placed? When I go to edit to a radius, holding the shift key, it keeps reverting back to square corners. Let's see. To edit a radius on a rectangle, draw a rectangle. I'm going to have to get into that and take a look at it simply because I don't know. That's a good question. Let's find out. So, I've got Aspire open here. Make sure I'm screen sharing, and I'll type F to center everything up, and I'll get rid of that vector and come over here and remove that component. Okay, in the drawing tab, you've got a rectangle, and apply, close. So you have a rectangle. Now you want to select the rectangle and put in radius corners. You want radius external. Let's go for radius of 1/4 inch. Boom. There we go. They're radiused. Now you were talking about, the interactive command to, let's see, I believe I have to go in here and drag to create the radius that way. You don't need to use the shift key. Okay, I see what it says. To edit an existing shape, hold shift while selecting. I've never done that. I've never held down shift while selecting something to edit. I've just always selected the object. Now, here's something that you do have to do if you just close it. Well, no, it didn't. It did work. Usually it says you have to click apply. But yeah, I've never held down shift to edit an object. I just select it, go back in, and it selects the object I've been working with. And then I can drag till I think I've got what I like. And let's say there's a 1-inch radius. Apply, close, done. I've never had it revert back. But then again, I don't hold shift while I'm doing any editing. So, hope that answers that. If that's not what you mean, please let me know, and I'll do what I can. So, okay, let's see. Peckerhead Carving 78. I don't mind, but I don't think that I don't think that YouTube will allow it. You can try it. I don't care, but as soon as he gets it, you might want to come back and remove it because you don't want that out. Steve says my audio is messing up. Is it? Okay. Well then, that is a good, okay, frog in mic. A couple of people are saying audio is messing up. All right, then that's a good excuse to go ahead and end this. I don't know what's happening. Last time this happened, I had to unplug my mic and plug it back in, and we don't want to do that live. So I'm going to go ahead and end this by saying I hope I got everybody's question. Thank you very, very much to everybody who has hit those donation links down in the description. Thank you very much, more than you'll ever know. I really appreciate it. Thank you to everybody who has sent the super chat and who has done the super stickers. I hope to see you this afternoon at Michael Mazalek's video on doing the Celtic weave in VCarve. And I'm allowing you to show that peckerhead, and when he gets your email address, you might want to take it down so that it doesn't stay in there for you to get spammed. I don't know what next video is going to be about. Next week will just be open live Q&A. But I'll find something. Maybe I'll do something on creating 3D models with letters. Maybe I won't. I don't know. It's just going to depend. Thank you again. Have a happy Easter, everybody. Have a great Sunday. And go make some chips. Go do something cool. Tell somebody you love them. Just... well, after you watch Michael's video, of course, on the Celtic weave, do something cool. Do something for somebody else. Y'all have a good day. Thank you.